Many people believe that being a high-vibration woman means always smiling or ignoring the world's difficulties, but for Carl Jung, this strength is synonymous with consciousness. A woman who inhabits this high frequency is one who has done the work of integrating her light and her shadow, becoming a solid and authentic presence. The narcissist, in his search for a mirror that validates his artificial grandiosity, is magnetically attracted to this brilliance, believing he can consume this vitality. However, what he finds is not easy prey, but an individual who possesses a keen perception of the hidden dynamics of the psyche. This woman does not vibrate at the frequency of neediness, which makes it impossible for the emotional hooks typical of a draining relationship to take hold of her. She understands that her brilliance is a sacred resource and that its awakening requires constant vigilance against external control patterns. The encounter between a conscious woman and an emotionally immature person generates an immediate clash of realities that unmasks the manipulator's lack of empathy. For Jung, the narcissist lives through the persona, a social mask of perfection, while the high-vibration woman seeks the truth of the self, the center of the soul. She is not seduced by superficial charm, as her intuition acts as a high-precision radar that detects inauthenticity on first contact. While the manipulator tries to project an image of savior or misunderstood victim, she observes the real behavior behind the words. This wise detachment is what protects her from entering cycles of devaluation that mark the soul of those who have not yet awakened. High vibration is, ultimately, the ability to remain true to one's own essence, even in the face of a master of manipulation. Unlike those who seek to fill existential voids in another person, a high-vibration woman has already undergone the process of internal reconstruction and knows her own worth. She understands that relationships should be bridges to maturity, not labyrinths of mental confusion and constant psychological pressure. When a narcissist tries to invade her boundaries, he encounters a barrier of self-respect that is non-negotiable and completely transparent in its intentions. This woman does not feel the need to cure the immature partner, because she knows that each soul is responsible for its own journey of transformation. By refusing the role of caregiver to an insatiable ego, she ends the cycle of abuse before it can even take root. The clarity of her mind is the poison to narcissistic lies, forcing the other's shadow to reveal itself undisguised. Jung stated that whoever looks outside dreams, whoever looks inside awakens. And the high-vibration woman is fully awake to the traps of the ego. She uses solitude as a sanctuary for recharging, not allowing the noise of others' manipulations to destabilize her hard-won inner peace. Her silent strength lies in accepting her wholeness, which means she is not afraid of being seen as difficult for setting unwavering boundaries. The narcissist feels frustrated in her presence because he cannot find the necessary cracks of insecurity to plant the seed of doubt. For her, liberation from toxic patterns is not a struggle, but a natural consequence of living in harmony with the laws of the psyche. She walks with the dignity of one who knows that the best investment of her vital energy is her own continuous awakening. The secret to this dynamic lies in the understanding that high vibration acts as a spiritual disinfectant, exposing the rot of manipulative intentions. By maintaining her high frequency, this woman forces the narcissist to confront his own insignificance, something he tries to avoid through the exploitation of others. She doesn't engage in games of justification or circular arguments, preferring a sovereign silence that communicates she is not available for the theater of the absurd. The reconstruction of her life after any contact with toxicity is done through a return to her center, strengthening her connection with the sacred feminine. This woman is living proof that consciousness is the ultimate shield and that the light of truth never loses its power. Each step she takes towards her emotional sovereignty is a definitive closure of the cycle with the mediocrity of abuse. Silence is the most powerful tool in the arsenal of a woman who has achieved spiritual and psychic maturity, according to Jung's teachings. While the narcissist feeds on emotional reactions and the chaos they can generate in others, the high-vibration woman offers only stillness. She understands that words wasted on those who lack empathy are like seeds sown on stony ground, destined to wither without germinating. By adopting sovereign silence, she retains her vital energy and leaves the manipulator talking to himself with his own projections and lies. This sign of self-respect communicates that her inner world is private and that no one has the right to disturb it without express permission. If you feel that your peace is your greatest treasure and you want to learn how to shield your soul from these patterns, subscribe to the channel right now. Jung explained that silence is the womb of wisdom, the space where the soul processes impacts and transmutes pain into absolute cutting clarity. A woman of high vibration does not react impulsively to provocations, for she inhabits the space between the external stimulus and her internal, conscious response. She observes the manipulator's gaslighting tactics with almost clinical curiosity, without allowing doubt to take root in her firm mind. By strategically withdrawing, she signals that the phase of allowing disrespect is over, and that she now governs her own reality. This withdrawal is not an act of weakness, but a demonstration of silent strength that destabilizes the narcissist's imagined omnipotence. The manipulator loses power the instant they realize they can no longer cause an emotional shock or a defensive reaction. The practice of strategic withdrawal involves closing cycles where reciprocity is absent and where vitality is drained by patterns of control. Conscious women don't try to have the last word in discussions with emotionally immature people because they know that truth doesn't need aggressive defense. They simply close the doors of their soul and redirect their focus to projects that promote their own reconstruction and lasting happiness. For Jung, this movement of introversion is vital for psychic energy to flow towards the self, strengthening the individual's integrity. Silence then becomes a high-frequency vibration that naturally repels those who seek only to exploit the goodness of others. Liberation occurs when silence ceases to be a burden and becomes their throne of moral authority. In everyday life, this sign manifests itself in the selectivity with which she chooses her conversations and the people who have access to her sacred circle of trust. She doesn't feel obligated to explain her boundaries, acting with a naturalness that commands respect without her needing to raise her voice. The high-vibration woman understands that her peace is non-negotiable and that time is a limited resource that should be spent on what builds her up. If the narcissist tries to return with empty promises, he finds only the void of a person who has already forgiven herself and freed herself from the past. Wise silence protects the seed of her new self, ensuring that rebirth happens far from influences that seek only silencing. This posture is the basis of a full life where dignity is the air she breathes with each new dawn. Jung believed that the whole individual becomes a center of force that organizes the environment around them through their mere centered presence. By inhabiting their high vibration, this woman doesn't need to fight against evil. She simply shines in a way that the shadow cannot withstand. The narcissist ends up withdrawing in search of more vulnerable victims who still react to their game of control and emotional manipulation. Silence is the signature of a soul that has found its true voice and decided that it will no longer be wasted on absurdity. The reconstruction of the powerful aura passes through this sacred retreat, where the woman becomes her own best company and defender. She is proof that calm is the greatest victory over chaos, and that self-respect is the key to ultimate liberation. Gaslighting is the preferred tactic of those seeking to control another's mind, but it fails miserably against a woman who has integrated her shadow. Jung taught that the shadow contains everything we don't want to admit about ourselves, and the manipulator uses these blind spots to plant doubt. A high-vibration woman has already illuminated her inner depths and knows her weaknesses as well as her virtues, leaving no room for external lies. She knows exactly who she is, what she saw and what she felt, making her perception of reality an impregnable territory for manipulation. When the narcissist tries to distort the facts, she doesn't get lost in justifications because her inner clarity is sovereign and independent of validation. This maturity is what ensures that the toxic pattern cannot take root in her ever-vigilant and conscious psyche. The integration of the shadow self grants this woman an emotional intelligence that identifies malice disguised as care or envy masked as subtle praise. She is not afraid of being seen as bad for setting firm boundaries, as she has accepted that healthy aggression is necessary to protect her life. Jung explained that being good is not the same as being harmless, and a woman of high vibration is extremely dangerous to those who live a lie. She uses her silent strength to dismantle the narcissist's performances, acting with a radical honesty that disarms the oppressor's theater. By recognizing her own impulses, she loses the fear of others' darkness and begins to navigate the world with a compass of unwavering integrity. The reconstruction of her identity involves this courageous acceptance of her total humanity, without the shackles of an illusory social perfection. Immunity to gaslighting stems from absolute trust in one's own intuition, which Jung called one of the 4 fundamental functions of our consciousness. The spiritual woman understands that her body and soul signal danger long before her reason can explain what is happening. She validates her feelings of discomfort instead of suppressing them to be agreeable or understanding with those who are hurting or pressuring her. This fidelity to her own senses is what ends the cycle of abuse right at the beginning, preventing the manipulator from gaining emotional ground. She has learned that clarity is a birthright and that no one has the authority to redesign her memory or her fundamental values. Her elevated vibration acts as a filter that disintegrates attempts at psychological control, keeping her awakening in a constant flow of peace. At this stage of maturation, the woman ceases to be a victim of circumstances and becomes the architect of her own mental and spiritual security. She no longer seeks consensus with those who practice disrespect, for she has understood that harmony with the manipulator requires the sacrifice of her own sanity. The individuation process has led her to a level where the fear of others' judgment has been replaced by the fear of betraying herself again for the sake of emotional crumbs. The reconstruction of the soul reaches its final phase, when she realizes that truth is her only safe haven and that lies have no power over the integrated self. She walks in the world with the tranquility of one who has already faced her ghosts and discovered that they have no real substance in the face of consciousness. The integrated shadow has become her shield, transforming her former vulnerability into a resilient and prophetic force. Finally, the high-vibration woman uses the clarity she has gained to inspire the awakening of others, acting as a beacon in seas of psychic confusion. She demonstrates that healing is possible when we decide to face what hurts and establish non-negotiable boundaries to protect our permanent reconstruction. The narcissist is forced to retreat as he cannot find the soil of naivete where he used to plant his seeds of disorder and emotional suffering. The integration of the shadow is the final act of rebellion against manipulation, revealing that the light of consciousness is the only effective remedy against the shadows. She celebrates her wholeness, knowing that each scar of overcoming is proof of her moral authority and her divine sovereignty. The awakening of a woman is the awakening of a new collective consciousness, free from the chains of devaluation and full of self-respect. For Jung, self-worth is not something we receive from others, but an internal achievement born from a deep connection with our divine essence. A high-vibration woman understands that her value is intrinsic and does not depend on mirroring an immature ego that only knows how to devalue. She uses this self-respect as a non-negotiable shield, filtering who is allowed into her inner garden of peace and awakening. When the narcissist tries to dim her light with veiled criticism or punitive silences, he encounters a structure that does not waver under emotional pressure. She knows that the phase of begging for attention is in the past, and that now she inhabits the throne of her own sovereignty and clarity. Closing any cycle of disrespect is experienced by her as an act of self-love and a necessary turning point for her evolution. This woman's self-worth manifests in her ability to say no without needing to give exhaustive justifications or apologize for existing. She understands that time is her most sacred resource, and that her vitality should only be invested in what promotes constant flourishing and reconstruction. The manipulator detests limits, as they remove the control he exerted over the psychic and emotional territory of the conscious victim. However, for the spiritual woman, limits are bridges of self-respect that guarantee the integrity of her spiritual and human maturation. She does not fear abandonment, for she has discovered that her own company is a feast of fullness that no narcissist can offer or sustain. Her high vibration attracts connections based on reciprocity, while naturally repelling those who seek only a source of supply for a hungry ego. Jung stated that we cannot change anything without first accepting it, and this woman fully accepted her right to be happy and respected in all her relationships. She stopped carrying the burden of trying to save people who refuse to look at their own shadow and who feel comfortable in their lack of empathy. The reconstruction of her emotional life is based on the clarity that she deserves the best and that the mediocrity of abuse no longer has a place at her table. Self-worth is the armor that deflects the arrows of devaluation, allowing her to walk with an unwavering posture of dignity. She understands that each act of self-respect strengthens her aura, making her unreachable for those who live immersed in the toxic pattern of manipulation. The rebirth of her silent strength is the testament to a consciousness that chose the light instead of comfortable submission. By cultivating her self-worth, she transmutes the draining experiences of the past into pearls of wisdom that now adorn her new identity as a sovereign woman. She looks at those who once tried to diminish her with detached compassion, acknowledging the emotional immaturity of others without being affected by the impact of their words. True liberation occurs when the opinion of others loses the power to define who she is or what she is capable of achieving on her journey. The reconstruction of her soul reaches its peak when self-worth becomes automatic, a constant breath of dignity that informs each of her daily decisions. She inhabits herself with pride, knowing that psychic wholeness demands the courage to be who one was born to be, whatever the cost. Her high vibration is the seal of her victory over the darkness of disrespect and the announcement of her new and brilliant path. Living from self-worth means that a high-vibration woman no longer accepts participating in circular dramas that only seek to consume her sacred radiance. She establishes a hierarchy of priorities where her inner peace occupies first place, protected by clear boundaries and honest, direct communication. The awakening of this consciousness is what makes her immune to control tactics, as she perceives manipulation even before the first move is made. The reconstruction of her life is a process of spiritual beautification, where clarity replaces confusion and self-respect heals the wounds of a self-esteem that was once shaken. She walks the world as a living example that the soul can flourish again, even after the harshest winters of lovelessness. Her courage to honor herself is the light that guides her steps towards fullness and real success in all areas of her vibrant existence. Unlike many people who fear silence and isolation, the high-vibration woman masters the art of solitude as a path to profound healing. Carl Jung saw solitude not as an absence of people, but as the absolute presence of the self, the place where conversations with the soul can finally take place. She uses periods of strategic withdrawal to replenish her vital energy and strengthen her connection with the sacred feminine that dwells within her. The narcissist, who desperately depends on external mirroring to feel that they exist, cannot comprehend this absolute and sovereign emotional independence. How have you been using your moments of solitude to rebuild your inner strength and clarity of purpose? Do you feel you already inhabit your own sanctuary of peace? In this space of retreat, the conscious woman closes the cycle with all the external voices that tried to diminish her magnitude or silence her intuition. She understands that solitude is the fertile ground where spiritual maturity germinates, free from the interference of toxic patterns or worldly and social manipulations. The reconstruction of the soul requires moments of absolute silence, so that the wounds caused by a lack of empathy can be properly cleansed and healed by the light of consciousness. She does not seek to escape herself, but to delve ever deeper into the truth of her existence, integrating each lesson learned in the emotional desert. Solitude then becomes her protective headquarters, where she draws the maps of her new limits and her future victories and transformations. Full awakening occurs when being alone ceases to be a fear and becomes her greatest pleasure and energy recharge. The mastery of solitude allows this woman to clearly identify the difference between true love and the need to fill deep existential voids. She no longer accepts relationships based on neediness, having discovered that her source of joy is internal and inexhaustible in her divine essence. Jung explained that individuation requires us to become one with ourselves, and solitude is the laboratory where this mystical union between the ego and the self is consolidated. The manipulator tries to use the threat of abandonment as an emotional leash, but he fails before a woman who has already found herself in her own company. She walks with the lightness of someone who knows she doesn't need anyone to be whole, which paradoxically makes her much more attractive to what is noble. The reconstruction of her life reaches a new level of stability when the fear of being alone is transmuted into the courage to be free. Beyond healing, solitude offers the high-vibration woman the gift of prophetic vision regarding her own path and the intentions of those who approach her. In the silence of her inner sanctuary, the masks of others lose their meaning, and the naked truth is revealed through dreams, intuitions, and unwavering mental clarity. She uses this time to plan her strategic turnaround, ensuring that each future step is grounded in self-respect and fidelity to her sovereign values. The reconstruction of her powerful aura happens when she stops giving explanations to the world and focuses on satisfying the call of her own higher and awakened consciousness. Spiritual maturity is the fruit harvested in the silence of observation, where the woman learns to be the calm observer of her own destiny and the shadows of others. Her silent strength shines with an intensity that disorients those who live in the constant noise of immaturity and control. Living solitude as a sanctuary means that the high-vibration woman is no longer available to be the emotional reservoir for those who do not do the work of healing. She protects her time with the vigilance of a guardian, knowing that her vitality is the engine of her rebirth and her existential and spiritual success. The reconstruction ended in the realization that inner peace is the only true luxury, and that it must be guarded with unwavering boundaries and a serene and constant firmness. Jung would be proud to see a soul that no longer gets lost in the collective sea, but has found its safe harbor on the rock of divine self-sufficiency. Each time she chooses herself and her sacred space, she strengthens the force field that prevents the re-entry of patterns of aggressive manipulation. Her solitude is her glory, the ultimate proof that she has conquered the world by conquering herself through integrity and awakening. Carl Jung described intuition as one of the psychological functions that allows us to see beyond appearances, grasping hidden intentions and the future potential of everyday situations. For a high-vibration woman, intuition is not a hunch, but a high-tech emotional radar that identifies a lack of integrity in the first subtle signs. She has learned to trust that butterflies in the stomach feeling, or the sense of heaviness that arises in the presence of emotionally immature and manipulative people, even under false smiles. Spiritual maturity requires you to stop asking for logical proof for what your soul has already perceived as a character flaw or an invasion of boundaries. Rebuilding self-confidence is the most powerful act of rebellion against gaslighting, as it returns to the woman the command of her own perceived reality. The awakening of this radar is what definitively ends the period of being easy prey for the shadows of manipulation and external control. The awakening of intuition allows this woman to navigate turbulent waters with a calmness that disorients those who try to confuse her with distorted justifications and structured lies. She no longer engages in the game of trying to intellectually understand the narcissist, because her soul has already given her the final verdict on his lack of empathy through feeling. Jung explained that intuition connects us with the collective unconscious, providing an ancestral wisdom that protects the sacred feminine from new, exhausting experiences of disrespect. The high-vibration woman validates her internal sensations with the same weight she gives to external facts, establishing a psychic integrity that no one can shake again. The reconstruction of her life involves this constant reaffirmation that her inner compass is infallible and sovereign over the opinions of others and worldly pressures. She has learned that truth often whispers, while lies scream through noisy and seductive personas that seek only easy domination. The practice of listening to the unconscious radar requires a maturity that no longer accepts silencing one's own voice to maintain artificial peace in toxic and empty relationships. The conscious woman knows that peace without truth is merely a disguised prison, and she prefers the sharp clarity of intuition to the comfortable blindness of absolute denial. The narcissist loses his usefulness when he encounters a woman whose gaze pierces his social mask and sees the shadow he tries to hide with so much effort and falsehood. The reconstruction of the soul reaches its fullness when the woman uses her intuition to attract connections that vibrate at the same frequency of light, reciprocity, and profound clarity. She no longer needs external surveillance, as her internal radar is active 24 hours a day, acting as an invisible shield against any attempt at further manipulation. Liberation is the state of one who has discovered that she possesses within herself all the necessary protective tools to flourish safely and freely. Often, past betrayals of one's own intuition have been the gateway to toxic patterns, but the high-vibration woman has forgiven herself and learned the lesson definitively. She now uses the memory of that radar glitch as fuel for an even sharper and more vigilant awakening to her emotional and spiritual sovereignty. Rebuilding inner peace requires the woman to become the guardian of her own truth, not allowing anyone to induce her to doubt her divine instincts again. Jung saw intuition as the channel of direct communication with the divine, and following it is an act of adoration for life and unconditional self-respect in the face of time. She walks through the world with the tranquility of one who possesses an internal map of human territory, identifying oases of integrity and fleeing the swamps of immature and egocentric minds. Intuition is her sword of light, cutting through the webs of mental confusion and revealing the path to her epic and unwavering rebirth. Living with this heightened perception transforms the high-vibration woman into a prophetic presence who sees life's turning points long before they manifest in material and social reality. She uses this gift to protect herself and to guide others in their search for healing, transforming her maturation into a sacred service to life and collective consciousness. The reconstruction culminated in the certainty that the soul is never unprotected when it chooses to listen to the whispers of the self in the silence of non-reactive and wise observation. The narcissist feels exposed before this radar because he realizes that there is no darkness, that the light of this woman cannot penetrate with her integrated vision. High vibration is the result of this inner transparency, where there are no more secrets between the ego and the soul, allowing life to flow gloriously. Follow your intuition with the dignity of one who knows she is guided by the sacred and that her awakening is the promise of a peace that nothing can again disturb or extinguish. The clearest sign that a woman has reached the peak of her emotional reconstruction is the development of wise indifference towards the narcissist and their tactics. Carl Jung explained that hatred is still a strong emotional bond that gives energy to the other person, but indifference is the total withdrawal of psychic investment from the manipulator. When a high-vibration woman decides that someone is no longer relevant to her narrative, she deactivates all the hooks that previously kept her trapped in the cycle of abuse. She no longer feels the need to explain, accuse, or try to convert the manipulator to the truth, because her clarity about the other person's emotional immaturity is absolute. Wise indifference is the final verdict that communicates to the other person that they have lost access to the sacred territory of her soul and her peace. At what point did you feel that the other person's behavior had completely lost its power to destabilize your internal vibration? This indifference doesn't stem from a cold heart, but from a healed heart that has learned the invaluable worth of its protected and well-directed vitality. The conscious woman observes the manipulator's attempts at hoovering or new attempts at devaluation as if watching a repeated film with no real interest. She understands that the narcissist seeks emotional reaction as sustenance, and by denying this reaction, she strategically and silently starves the toxic pattern. Spiritual maturity teaches that our attention is our most precious asset and that it should only be invested in what promotes our reconstruction and awakening. Jung pointed out that liberation occurs when the self is no longer affected by the projections of another's ego, inhabiting a sovereignty that is unattainable to the shadows of manipulation. Indifference is the sign that the woman has already achieved the definitive closure of the cycle, and now inhabits the fullness of her new life of glory. By mentally discarding the need for validation or justice from an emotionally immature person, this woman recovers the fragments of her soul that were scattered in pain. She stops monitoring social media, asking for news, or nurturing imaginary dialogues of justification, focusing entirely on her own brilliance and personal success. The reconstruction of the soul reaches its maturity when the presence or absence of the manipulator has the same weight, 0, because the source of her happiness is now entirely internal and divine. Jung teaches us that true healing is an act of detachment from what is false, so that what is real can finally flourish in all its unwavering and potent magnitude. Wise indifference is the crystal armor that reflects the narcissist's intentions back to him, keeping the woman in a state of grace and constant self-respect. She is the absolute mistress of her vibration, deciding who deserves her seed of attention and who should be left to the ashes of oblivion. Living with this indifference requires loving vigilance over past impulses, ensuring that no trace of guilt or neediness is used to open the soul's doors to disrespect again. The high-vibration woman uses her awakening to identify the circular patterns of emotional manipulation and cuts these threads with the sharp blade of her non-negotiable and vigilant self-respect. She has discovered that the best response to lovelessness is her own fullness, and that the success of her maturation is the greatest setback a narcissist can suffer in their futility. The reconstruction ended in the realization that life is too short to be spent in other people's labyrinths, preferring the straight line of her purpose of transformation and sovereign light. She inhabits the present with an intensity that disintegrates bitter memories, transforming the impact suffered into a step of wisdom to guide other women in search of real healing. Discarding manipulation is her final act of spiritual sovereignty, marking the beginning of an eternity of peace. Finally, wise indifference proves that the high-vibration woman is no longer a victim, but a master of her own journey of individuation and constant rebirth. She looks at the narcissist as an anthropological curiosity, someone who chose stagnation in the shadows, while she chose the infinite flight of full consciousness integrated with the sacred self. The reconstruction of her faith in life and truth is unwavering, for she has seen the worst of human nature and courageously decided to be the embodiment of the best and the divine. Jung would smile to see a soul that no longer fragments due to a lack of empathy from others, but expands through an abundance of self-respect and unconditional pure dignity. Her high vibration is the seal of her spiritual victory, ensuring that her future is free from the shadows of the past and rich in connections that honor her restored magnitude. Proceed with the indifference of one who knows who she is and where she is going, for the universe celebrates her freedom and her eternal peace. The eighth rare sign of a high-vibration woman is the perfect balance between sharp, instinctive intelligence and unwavering serenity, the synthesis of Jungian maturity. She possesses what Jung would call the wisdom of the serpent, capable of identifying hidden dangers in the soil of relationships and crawling away from emotional traps long before the attack. At the same time, she maintains the gentleness of the dove, an aura of profound calm that communicates that her strength does not need aggression to be felt and respected by all around her. This balance between vigilance and peace is what makes her unreachable for the narcissist, for she is astute in defending her territory and gentle in the emanation of her divine vitality. She understands that her sensitivity is the sensor that detects lies, while her self-respect is the barrier that prevents the shadow of others from profaning her inner garden of light. This union of opposites allows the conscious woman to deal with emotionally immature minds without being sucked into the magnetism of chaos and mental confusion typical of these profiles. She identifies the pattern of control in the first word, but instead of engaging in combat, she uses wise indifference and strategic retreat to preserve her absolute clarity. Spiritual maturity teaches that true authority does not come from shouting, but from the consistency of a stance that does not negotiate truth in exchange for illusory affection. Jung saw in individuation the birth of a robust personality that integrates all the psychic tools for survival and the full flourishing of the soul in the modern world. The reconstruction of her trajectory reaches excellence when the woman becomes capable of loving without being naive, and of protecting her peace without becoming bitter or cold in the face of vibrant life. Her silent strength shines through this harmony, being a beacon for those seeking total liberation from the chains of disrespect and manipulation. In everyday life, this sign manifests itself in the tranquility with which she establishes unwavering boundaries, acting with an elegance that disarms any attempt at aggressive or subtle and invasive psychological pressure. She observes manipulation tactics with the clarity of someone who sees through the veil of another's persona, recognizing the manipulator's shadow as a tragic limitation of theirs, not hers. The reconstruction of the soul ends in the fullness of this being who inhabits the present moment, with a radiant presence, emanating a security that calms the righteous and repels those who seek exploitation. Jung explained that the integration of all the functions of the psyche brings an inner security that the external world cannot give or take away from us at any time or circumstance. The high-vibration woman lives this truth, transforming the impact of exhausting experiences into a prophetic wisdom that now guides her steps away from new labyrinths of senseless pain. Peace is her natural state, the fruit of a maturation that honored each scar as a seal of definitive spiritual sovereignty. Living between wisdom and gentleness requires a constant connection with the self, the unwavering center of the psyche that offers clarity and moral authority even in the face of life's greatest storms. This woman does not allow the shadows of the past to cloud her present judgment, treating each encounter as an opportunity to reaffirm her integrity and her purpose of continuous awakening. She has become the guardian of her own flame, ensuring that her vitality is invested only in connections that offer real reciprocity and respect for her sovereign autonomy. The reconstruction of her life reaches its glory when she realizes that her strength lies in the union of her polarities, being simultaneously protective of her light and open to the wonder of the new. Jung teaches us that the goal of life is wholeness, and this woman is the personification of this successful pursuit through healing and conscious, resilient transformation. Her high vibration is the aroma of a soul that has integrated and now celebrates life with all its intensity and eternal brilliance. Finally, this stage of emotional sovereignty reveals that the narcissist has lost his educational function in the woman's life, as she has already absorbed all the wisdom necessary to never return to the labyrinth. She silently thanks the harsh lessons that forced her to awaken, but now chooses the company of souls who also walk under the light of full consciousness and absolute truth. The reconstruction ended in the realization that she is the architect of her destiny, and that her heart is a sanctuary of peace whose key no one possesses except herself. Awakening is a permanent state of loving vigilance over oneself, where integrity is the only law permitted and respected in her sacred inner and outer realm. Proceed with the wisdom of the serpent to discern and the gentleness of the dove to shine, for your journey is an example of spiritual triumph for the entire awakened universe. You are free, you are whole, and your new life is a hymn of self-respect and vibrant, eternal glory. The final stage in the awakening of a high-vibration woman is the establishment of the throne of inner sovereignty, where she governs her own psyche with the wisdom of a queen. Jung described the queen as the archetype of full spiritual authority, that part of us that needs no subjects or external validation to feel powerful and whole. By traversing the emotional desert of manipulation and emerging with a rebuilt soul, this woman proves that the light of consciousness is infinitely superior to the shadows of selfish control. The narcissist becomes merely a forgotten footnote in her biography, a harsh master from the past whom she has already overcome with elegance and absolute, unwavering clarity. The victory of the soul manifests in the tranquility of one who knows who she is and where she is going, without fear of others' opinions or the tactics of immature and manipulative minds. Do you feel the weight of the crown of your own conscience on your chest, indicating that your epic rebirth is complete and your sovereignty has begun? The reconstruction of her life reaches its fullness when the high-vibration woman realizes that her spiritual maturity is the most precious gift she can offer to the world and to herself. She no longer carries grudges, having transmuted all resentment into fuel for her personal flourishing and for the awakening of other women who are still seeking true healing. Jung believed that the individual who heals helps heal the collective unconscious, acting as a seed of integrity amidst soils of falsehood and lack of human empathy. Her elevated vibration acts as a protective barrier that keeps her environment clean, attracting only what is noble, true, and compatible with her new sacred and unconditional dignity. Liberation occurs the moment she realizes that the final phase of her pain was the fertile ground where her greatest spiritual power needed to be sown under silence and self-respect. Peace is her permanent state of being, a territory she defends with the authority of a consciousness that confronted lies and chose the light. The legacy of a spiritual woman is living proof that the human soul possesses an infinite capacity for regeneration, transforming any emotional impact into a stepping stone of prophetic wisdom. She walks with the firmness of one who has found her place in the universe and understands that her vitality is a channel for healing and positive transformations for the planet and for destiny. The reconstruction culminated in the realization that true justice is her own unwavering happiness and the success of her life purpose focused on non-negotiable truth and peace. Jung taught us that becoming who we are is the greatest privilege of existence, and this woman inhabits this privilege with the gratitude of one who has rediscovered herself after a long and dark emotional eclipse. She is sovereign of her mind, mistress of her feelings, and architect of a tomorrow where disrespect no longer has a voice or a place to hide or thrive. Her new path is a work of art, written with the inks of freedom, clarity, and self-love that nothing can shake or diminish. Looking at the trajectory of a high-vibration woman, we see that her victory wasn't winning an argument with a narcissist, but rather becoming unreachable by his vibrational frequency. She won the moment she decided that her self-respect was worth more than any illusion of companionship or financial or social security offered by cheap and selfish manipulation. The reconstruction of the soul is the triumph of the self over the chains of the collective and aggressive persona, revealing the glory of an essence born to shine without ever apologizing again. Jung would be at peace, seeing a soul that faced the abyss and brought back the lantern of truth to illuminate not only her own path, but that of all wounded humanity. Spiritual awakening is the point of no return, where the woman takes full command of her destiny and celebrates the eternity of her full consciousness integrated with the sacred self. Peace is the seal of her integrity, a state of grace that she now inhabits with all the silent and radiant strength of her healed being. We conclude this journey through deep feminine psychology with the certainty that high vibration is the result of a daily choice for light and non-negotiable self-respect in the face of time. May the example of the conscious woman inspire your own new beginning, and may Jung's wisdom be the compass that guides your steps away from any pattern of manipulation or unjust control. Always remember that you are the guardian of your own flame, and that your awakening is the greatest threat to any control system based on lies and lack of empathy. The reconstruction ended in the fullness of a life that now flourishes in gardens of self-respect and permanent positive transformations in your integrated and awakened soul. Proceed with the dignity of one who has overcome the eclipse and now walks under the unwavering sun of your own absolute, full, and infinitely beautiful truth before life and the divine universe. You are free, you are sovereign, and your peace is eternal on the throne of your divine and restored consciousness.